The night had slipped into one of those hours when the city seemed half asleep. New York streets glistened under a steady drizzle, their usual roar softened to a muted hum. Lena pulled her jacket tight against her chest as she walked away from the building where the student party had just ended. Laughter still spilled faintly from the windows above, but she wanted no part in it anymore. Crowds drained her, and though her friends insisted she stay longer, she craved quiet. Her boots splashed through shallow puddles as she turned onto a nearly empty avenue. The bus stop stood deserted, a flickering lamp humming overhead. She checked her phone, the screen blurry under droplets of rain, and realized the next bus would not arrive for almost 40 minutes. A sigh escaped her, half frustration, half resignation. She tilted her head back, letting the misty rain touch her face. For a brief moment she thought of walking the entire way home, but the distance was too far and the streets too empty. Headlights appeared in the distance, cutting through the mist like twin beacons. She expected another cab to pass, but instead, the car slowed as it neared the stop. It was not a yellow cab at all, but a dark vintage model, polished even under the rain, with lines that spoke of another decade. The window rolled down slowly, and Lena's heart gave a nervous jump. A woman leaned slightly toward the opening. Her features were striking even in the dim light, framed by wet strands of hair that clung to her cheeks. Her eyes, dark and steady, studied Lena with quiet curiosity. "Are you waiting for the bus at this hour?" Her voice was low, controlled, carrying a subtle warmth. Lena hesitated. She was not used to strangers pulling over like this. "Yes," she answered softly, pulling her hood tighter. "You may be waiting a long time," the woman replied, her gaze never wavering. "Do you need a lift?" "I'm headed toward Brooklyn." "You look soaked." The suggestion felt both tempting and alarming. Every instinct told her to be cautious, yet something in the woman's tone calmed her. It lacked the pushiness she often encountered with men, carried no hint of demand. It was an invitation, offered as simply as offering an umbrella. Lena hesitated, then nodded. The door clicked open, and she slid inside, the warmth of the leather seats enveloping her instantly. The scent of the car was faintly smoky, with a trace of sandalwood, as if time itself had lingered within its frame. The driver glanced at her briefly, then returned her eyes to the road. In the glow of the dashboard, Lena could see more clearly. She must have been around 45, her face bearing subtle lines at the corners of her mouth, lines carved not by weakness, but by experience. Her hair was short, styled with ease, though the damp weather gave it a restless wave. "Thank you," Lena murmured, her voice more timid than she intended. The woman inclined her head slightly. "It's no trouble. I would not leave someone standing alone in the rain at this hour." They drove in silence for a few minutes. The city slid past, neon signs blurred by water streaks on the glass. Lena sat with her hands folded in her lap, glancing occasionally at the woman's profile. There was a calmness in her manner, but also a gravity that hinted at years lived intensely. "What's your name?" the woman asked finally, eyes fixed on the road. "Lena," she said. The woman allowed the name to linger for a moment. "Clara," she replied, as though returning a secret. Lena repeated it in her mind. Clara. The name suited her. Strong yet elegant, carrying weight without effort. "You're a student?" Clara asked, the corners of her lips turning upward. "Yes." "Architecture. A demanding subject. You must see the world in lines and shapes." The observation startled Lena. She had grown used to people asking trivial questions, never listening long enough for depth. But Clara's words felt different. She spoke as if she had been watching Lena's mind work, as if she could read patterns within her. "Maybe," Lena admitted, shifting uncomfortably yet intrigued. "I guess I notice buildings more than people sometimes." Clara chuckled softly, a sound low and warm. "Buildings are honest. People are rarely so." The remark struck Lena as both cynical and true. She wanted to ask what Clara meant, but the way she said it made Lena feel as though the explanation lived somewhere in Clara's gaze rather than in words. They drove past a row of shuttered shops, the rain easing into a mist. Clara switched on the wipers once more, then asked, "Where shall I drop you?" Lena hesitated. "Near the university is fine." Clara nodded, her focus never leaving the road. Yet Lena sensed something unspoken, an invisible thread stretched between them. She glanced at Clara again, studying her jawline, the firm curve of her mouth, the concentration etched into her brow. Clara was not the kind of woman Lena usually met, not a classmate, not a professor, not a neighbor. She carried herself with an aura of someone who had crossed countless roads and learned to master each one. When they reached the corner near Lena's residence, the car slowed. Clara turned slightly toward her. "Here you are." Lena's fingers lingered on the door handle, reluctant to break the moment. "Thank you again," she said softly. Clara's lips curved into something between a smile and a farewell. "Stay dry, Lena." The words were ordinary, yet the way she said them, layered with quiet gravity, made Lena's heart skip. She stepped out, pulling her jacket close again, the rain now little more than a whisper. As the vintage car rolled away, its red taillights fading into the fog, Lena stood still for a moment, her pulse unsettled. She told herself it was nothing, only kindness from a stranger. Yet deep inside, she knew she had crossed paths with someone who left more than a passing impression. Clara's face, her eyes, her voice lingered as Lena walked home. She could not explain why, but the night felt altered, as if the city had shifted slightly on its axis. Back in her small room, Lena changed into dry clothes and sat by the window. Drops of rain clung to the glass, reflecting the dim glow of the street lamps. She replayed every detail of that ride, the scent inside the car, the sound of Clara's laugh, the subtle weight in her tone. She felt restless, aware of a pull she did not understand. Most encounters in Lena's life vanished quickly, like fading chalk lines on pavement. Yet this one etched itself deeper, refusing to disappear. Clara was a stranger, yet in her presence Lena had sensed a strange familiarity, as if she had glimpsed a version of herself she had not yet grown into. She leaned her head against the cool glass, watching the rain soften the city into blurred patterns. Sleep did not come easily. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Clara's profile lit by the dashboard, her calm eyes focused on the road. Something within Lena stirred, fragile yet insistent. The city continued breathing beyond her window, unaware that a single meeting had already begun to alter her inner world. The week after that rainy night unfolded like any other. Classes filled Lena's days, crowded studios and restless evenings where she tried to finish sketches that never satisfied her. Yet no matter how occupied she kept herself, she often found her thoughts drifting back to that encounter in the car. She remembered the steady confidence of Clara's voice, the calm weight of her presence, and the impression that lingered after the taillights vanished. It was a Saturday afternoon when Lena wandered through an outdoor exhibition at Union Square. She had not planned to go, but a classmate had mentioned that several well-known photographers were displaying their work, and curiosity pulled her there. Stalls and panels stood under the open sky, each one showcasing frozen moments of city life, faces, buildings, fleeting movements caught on film. The air smelled faintly of roasted nuts from a nearby vendor, and the square buzzed with people weaving between displays. Lena moved from one set of images to another, letting her eyes trace the details. A series of stark black and white prints drew her attention. They captured ordinary corners of the city in ways that transformed them into something hauntingly alive. Shadows fell across brick walls, reflections fractured in puddles, anonymous silhouettes blurred at the edge of light. The name beside the collection was unfamiliar to most of the students around her, but when Lena read it, her breath caught. Clara. Her pulse quickened. She stood still, scanning the photographs again, as if they might reveal something personal about their creator. Each frame carried a quiet intensity, a sensitivity to solitude. She felt strangely exposed, as if the images were not only windows into the city, but also mirrors for her own hidden restlessness. A movement to her right broke her trance. Someone had stepped close, watching the same photographs. When Lena turned, her heart jolted. Clara stood beside her, dressed in a dark coat, a scarf loosely tied around her neck, a camera hanging from one shoulder. She did not seem surprised, only mildly amused, as if this meeting had been inevitable. "You came to see the exhibit," Clara said, her tone gentle but laced with recognition. Lena nodded, unable to form words at first. She managed, "Your work is here." Clara's lips curved faintly. "Part of it. These are fragments from a larger project." There was no arrogance in the way she spoke. Instead, she seemed almost detached, as though the images no longer belonged to her but to the city they depicted. They stood together for several minutes, silent, while passers-by drifted around them. Then Clara glanced at Lena. "I need someone to help with the new series. Carry equipment, manage small details. Would you be interested?" The offer arrived without ceremony, yet it felt monumental. Lena's heart pounded. She searched Clara's face for any sign of hesitation, but found only calm certainty. "Yes," she said quickly, more firmly than she expected. From that day forward, Lena became Clara's assistant. Their evenings took on a new rhythm, one shaped by unpredictable assignments. Sometimes Clara led her through narrow alleys lit only by scattered lamps. Other nights they climbed rusted fire escapes to reach rooftops where the city stretched endlessly below. Lena learned to hold reflectors, check film rolls, adjust tripods. At first her hands trembled, but under Clara's patient guidance she grew steadier. Working alongside her, Lena discovered that Clara's artistry was not simply about technique. She moved with instinct, framing subjects as though she could see beneath their surfaces. A stranger walking past, a faded mural, a cracked window pane, Clara caught them in ways that revealed hidden layers. Lena often found herself watching Clara more than the subjects themselves. The concentration in her eyes, the precise movements of her hands, the quiet authority in her posture fascinated her. They rarely spoke while shooting. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was charged with focus, filled with unspoken understanding. Only afterward, when they packed equipment, did conversation return. They discussed architecture, politics, old films. Clara's knowledge ran wide, and though she rarely spoke about herself, she listened intently when Lena described her classes or her frustrations with design projects. One evening, they were working in an abandoned railway yard on the edge of the city. The skeletal remains of tracks stretched into darkness, weeds pushing between the wooden planks. Clara wanted to capture the desolation, the way nature slowly reclaimed what industry had left behind. While she adjusted her camera, Lena wandered a short distance, running her fingers along the cold metal of a rusted signal pole. She felt a strange thrill, standing in a place that once pulsed with movement but now lay forgotten. When she returned, Clara was crouched low, capturing the curve of the tracks. She looked up, caught Lena's gaze, and smiled faintly. "You see it too, don't you? The beauty in decay." Lena nodded, a little breathless. "It feels alive, even in ruin." Clara studied her for a long moment, then returned to her camera. Lena felt heat rise in her chest. She realized that Clara was not only showing her how to view the world differently, she was showing her how to view herself differently. As weeks passed, their connection deepened. Sometimes Clara would hand Lena her camera, urging her to take a shot. Lena protested at first, claiming she had no skill, but Clara insisted. "You have an eye, even if you don't know it yet." Lena discovered the quiet thrill of framing her own perspective, of pressing the shutter and capturing a fraction of time that would never repeat. There were lighter moments too. On one chilly night, they huddled together under a single umbrella as wind whipped across a rooftop. Clara joked about the absurdity of balancing on unstable surfaces just to catch a particular angle. Lena laughed harder than she had in months, her nerves dissolving in the shared silliness. Yet beneath the humor, an undercurrent remained. Lena felt drawn to Clara in ways she struggled to name. It was not the admiration she felt for professors or mentors. It was something more magnetic, a pull she sensed in quiet glances, in the way her heart leapt when Clara's hand brushed hers while passing a lens. Still, Clara maintained a certain distance. She was never cold, never dismissive, but there was a line she did not cross. Her touch lingered only in practical necessity, her gaze warm but measured. She seemed aware of the energy between them, yet determined not to let it spill into something undefined. One night, after hours of shooting near the waterfront, they sat on a low wall watching the lights shimmer on the water. The air smelled of salt and smoke from distant food stalls. Clara handed Lena a bottle of sparkling water, and they drank quietly, their shoulders nearly touching. "Why do you do this?" Lena asked suddenly. "Spend nights chasing shadows, chasing moments most people never notice?" Clara considered the question, her eyes reflecting the city lights. "Because life is fragile. It disappears too quickly. A photograph is proof that it was here, even for an instant." The answer resonated deeply. Lena thought of her own restless nights, the sketches she discarded, the uncertainty of her path. She realized that Clara's photographs were more than art. They were a way of holding onto existence itself. As they walked back toward the car, Lena felt the urge to reach out, to close the small gap between them. But she held back. The fear of breaking whatever fragile balance they had built kept her still. Back in her room later that night, Lena stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her mind racing. She could not deny the intensity of her feelings any longer. She was drawn to Clara not only because of her artistry, but because she made Lena feel seen in a way she had never experienced. The days that followed only reinforced this. Their work together became a rhythm Lena craved. She anticipated each evening, not merely for the photography, but for the moments stolen in between. A glance exchanged, a sentence lingering longer than necessary, the comfort of knowing Clara was near. Still, Clara remained reserved, as if guarding something behind her composed exterior. That restraint only deepened Lena's fascination. She wanted to know what lay beneath the calm surface, what stories shaped the woman who now occupied her thoughts so fully. The bond between them had become undeniable, even if unspoken. Lena sensed they were approaching a threshold, though she did not know what awaited beyond it. She only knew that with each passing night, the distance between them grew thinner, and the pull toward Clara grew stronger, irresistible as the tide. The night was colder than usual, the kind of chill that seeps through layers and settles deep in the bones. Lena followed Clara through streets lined with shuttered factories, their walls marked with graffiti that stretched upward like silent cries. They had been working for hours, chasing the glow of sodium lamps and the jagged silhouettes of industrial ruins. When the rain began to fall, steady and insistent, Clara led her toward a vast warehouse on the edge of the district. The building loomed in the darkness, its windows shattered long ago, metal beams exposed like ribs of a carcass. Clara pushed the door, its rusty hinges groaning, and they stepped inside. The space was cavernous, filled with echoes of dripping water and the scent of dust. A few broken lights flickered weakly, casting uncertain shadows across the concrete floor. Clara spread a blanket near the center, away from the leaking roof. She unscrewed the cap of a bottle she had brought, poured a small amount into a paper cup, and offered it to Lena. The warmth of the drink spread through her chest, countering the damp air. They sat side by side, the silence thick, broken only by the sound of rain striking metal sheets above. Lena watched Clara's profile in the dim light. She seemed distant, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the walls. There was a weight in her expression, a heaviness that had not been there before. Curiosity swelled inside Lena, yet she hesitated to break the quiet. It was Clara who spoke first. "I used to come here years ago. This place was once alive. I rented part of it as a studio." Her voice carried a note of memory, tinged with sadness. Lena turned toward her, surprised. "You worked here?" Clara nodded slowly. "Yes. It was where I thought I had finally found freedom. I painted here, photographed here, even fell in love here." The last words lingered in the air. Lena felt her chest tighten. She wanted to ask, but the question caught in her throat. Clara seemed to sense it and continued. There was a woman. Younger than me, though not as young as you. She was fire, unpredictable and radiant. For a time, I believed we would build something lasting. But reality was heavier than both of us. She came from a family that wanted perfection, a neat marriage, children, a future that did not include me. Eventually, she walked away. The echo of Clara's words filled the vast emptiness. Lena imagined the scene, two women meeting here, their laughter once bouncing off the walls, their dreams rising and collapsing under the weight of expectation. I thought I could bear it, Clara whispered, her eyes fixed on the far side of the hall. But losing her tore holes I carried for years. Since then, I have tried not to let anyone close enough to do that again. Lena's breath trembled. She wanted to reach for Clara's hand, but fear held her still. That must have been painful, she managed. Clara gave a small, almost imperceptible smile. Painful, yes, but also necessary. Sometimes heartbreak teaches us more than love itself. I learned how fragile courage can be. They fell silent again. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming on the roof like distant applause. Lena felt her pulse race. Clara had peeled back a layer of herself, and in doing so, she had invited Lena into her vulnerability. After a long pause, Lena spoke softly. I don't think courage disappears forever. It changes shape. Maybe it hides until someone brings it back. Clara turned toward her. Their eyes met, and for a moment the distance between them dissolved. Lena felt exposed, as if Clara could see through her skin, into the raw truth she barely admitted to herself. You are braver than you realize, Clara said gently. But you are also at the beginning. I fear what stepping into this with me could cost you. Her words struck Lena like a challenge. She leaned forward slightly, her hands tightening in her lap. You make it sound like I have no choice. But I do. And I am choosing. Clara exhaled, her shoulders lowering as though carrying an invisible burden. She set the empty cup aside and rested her elbows on her knees. You remind me too much of who I was when I first walked into this warehouse years ago. I see the same hunger, the same confusion. That is why I hesitate. I know how deep the wounds can cut. Lena's voice quivered, but she did not look away. I don't want protection for myself. I want honesty. If I walk away now, I will regret it forever. Clara studied her, the silence stretching until Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. Then, with a quiet motion, Clara reached out, her fingertips brushing against Lena's wrist. The touch was featherlight, yet it sent a current rushing through her body. Are you certain? Clara asked, her tone a mixture of warning and yearning. Lena nodded, her throat too tight for words. Clara's hand lingered on her skin, then withdrew, leaving behind a trail of warmth. She leaned back slightly, her expression unreadable. You're young, Lena. You have an entire world to discover. I am not sure I should be the one guiding you. Lena felt frustration stir within her. Maybe I want to discover it with you. Maybe I want to learn from someone who already knows what it means to risk everything. Clara closed her eyes briefly, as if wrestling with invisible forces. When she opened them again, her gaze was softer, almost resigned. You may regret this someday. Or I may not, Lena whispered. The tension between them thickened, filling the air with possibility. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Clara did not move closer, but the space between them vibrated with unspoken desire. Lena longed to bridge it, to press forward, but she sensed Clara's restraint was not yet ready to break. Instead, Clara shifted the conversation. She spoke of photography, of how she chased shadows because they told stories light could not. She described the way the city revealed its secrets at night, how emptiness could be as beautiful as fullness. Lena listened, absorbing every word, not only for the meaning, but for the way Clara's voice curved around each phrase. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Eventually the rain eased, leaving the night quiet again. Clara packed away her camera, folding the blanket with deliberate care. It's late, she said softly. We should go. As they stepped out, the air smelled cleansed, the streets shimmering beneath streetlights. They walked side by side toward the car. Lena felt both exhilarated and unsettled. She had glimpsed Clara's hidden scars, and though the conversation had not ended in declarations, it had changed everything. The drive back was silent, but it was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two people carrying something fragile between them, something that could break with a single wrong word. When they reached Lena's stop, she lingered with her hand on the door handle. "Thank you for telling me," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Clara looked at her, eyes shadowed with memory. "I don't tell that story often." Lena swallowed, then stepped out, her heart racing. As she walked away, she felt the echo of Clara's touch still pulsing in her wrist. She knew the line between them had shifted. What remained was uncertain, but one truth was clear. She was already too far inside to turn back. Back in her room, Lena sat at her desk, staring at her notebooks without seeing them. She thought of Clara's past lover, of the dreams that had crumbled, of the scars left behind. She thought of her own restlessness, the unnamed yearning she carried. And she thought of Clara, the woman who had just let her peek into the depths she usually hid. Sleep did not come easily that night. Lena lay awake, listening to the city breathe outside, wondering what would happen when restraint could no longer hold back what pulled them together. The following week blurred into a rhythm of sleepless nights and hurried days, yet beneath every hour beat the memory of that warehouse and Clara's confession. Lena carried it with her into lectures, into sketch reviews, into the empty hours after classes when she tried to concentrate but could not. Clara's voice, the slight tremor when she spoke of loss, clung to her like a phantom. One evening Clara called unexpectedly. Her tone was calm as ever, though Lena thought she caught a trace of hesitation. She asked if Lena wanted to join her for a final session on the abandoned side of the docks before the authorities closed it for redevelopment. Lena agreed without thinking twice. They met near the water. The air was sharp with salt and the tang of metal. Massive cranes stood like frozen sentinels against a bruised sky. Clara carried her usual equipment, and Lena followed as they threaded through chain-link fences and piles of forgotten cargo. The place felt deserted, yet charged with echoes of what it once had been. Inside a vast hangar they found shelter from the cold. The roof had holes that let in narrow shafts of moonlight, scattering silver patches across the floor. Clara set her camera down, pulled out a bottle of wine, and placed 2 cups beside it. "We won't be here again," she said, almost to herself. "I thought it deserved a farewell." They sat on a folded tarp. The wine warmed Lena's throat, loosening the tightness she had carried all day. For a while they spoke lightly, about photographs, about the absurdity of bureaucrats tearing down spaces that still breathed with history. But gradually the conversation thinned. A quiet current rose between them, pulling stronger with every passing minute. Clara leaned back against a metal beam, her face half in shadow, half illuminated by the spill of light above. She looked almost unreal, like a figure carved out of night. Lena could not stop staring. The silence pressed down, heavy yet expectant. Her pulse grew uneven. At last she reached out, her fingers trembling as they brushed against Clara's hand resting on the tarp. Clara did not move, but her eyes lowered briefly to the touch. "Why do you keep holding back?" Lena asked softly, her words slipping out before she could contain them. Clara's gaze lifted, steady but troubled. "Because once I cross that line, there is no way back. And I am not sure you understand what that means." "I do," Lena whispered. "I may not have lived what you lived, but I know what I want." The words hung in the air. Clara studied her intently, as if searching for cracks, waiting for Lena to falter. When none came, she exhaled, long and quiet, then closed the distance with a slow, deliberate movement. Her lips brushed Lena's, feather-light at first, a test rather than a claim. Lena shivered. She leaned forward, deepening the contact, her hand tightening on Clara's. The kiss grew, tentative giving way to urgency. Years of restraint seemed to collapse in a single moment. Clara cupped Lena's face, her fingers steady yet tender. The taste of wine lingered between them. Lena felt her body yield, not from weakness, but from recognition. It was as if her entire being had waited for this precise collision. When they finally pulled apart, Lena's chest rose and fell rapidly. Clara's thumb lingered at the corner of her mouth. "Are you sure?" she murmured again, almost pleading. "Yes," Lena said firmly. "Please stop asking." Clara let out a soft laugh, half relief, half surrender. She drew Lena into another kiss, this one deeper, richer, filled with everything she had withheld for weeks. Lena felt the world blur around them, the cavernous hangar dissolving until only the warmth of Clara's body mattered. They toppled onto the tarp, laughter breaking through the tension. Clara's hair brushed against Lena's cheek, and Lena slid her fingers through it, marveling at its softness despite the damp air. Clara kissed the line of her jaw, the hollow beneath her ear, leaving trails that made Lena's breath catch. Lena had never known intimacy like this. With men, she had often felt like an object being claimed, something to endure more than share. With Clara, it was discovery, each movement a question and an answer all at once. She felt guided, but not controlled, drawn into a rhythm that honored her own responses. The hangar echoed with their muffled voices, with sighs and the sound of fabric shifting beneath them. Moonlight cut across their entwined bodies, gilding every touch in silver. Lena pressed herself closer, her nerves alive, her skin alight under Clara's hands. The sensation was not just physical but profound, as though a hidden chamber inside her had finally been unlocked. At one point, tears stung her eyes, startling her. Clara noticed instantly, pausing to wipe them with a gentle thumb. "Why are you crying?" "Because it feels like I've been asleep until now," Lena admitted. Clara held her, pressing her forehead against Lena's. "Then let yourself wake fully. Don't fight it." The night unfolded slowly, time unraveling in fragments of kisses and touches, in murmurs that faded into silence and rose again. Lena surrendered to the moment, her shyness dissolving under Clara's steady guidance. Every caress was deliberate, every pause filled with meaning. It was not haste, not hunger alone, but an act of unveiling. When finally they lay still, the tarp beneath them rumpled, Lena rested her head on Clara's shoulder. The warehouse felt transformed, no longer a ruin but a sanctuary. The rain had stopped outside, and through the broken roof stars shone faintly. Lena listened to Clara's heartbeat, steady and grounding. She felt safe, yet alive in a way that unsettled her. Clara stroked her hair absent-mindedly, her own breath evening out. "You changed everything tonight," Lena whispered. Clara's arm tightened around her. "Maybe you changed me too." They stayed like that until the chill returned, reminding them of the hour. Slowly they gathered themselves, folding the tarp, packing away the untouched part of the wine. Their movements were quiet, subdued, as if words might shatter the fragile balance they had reached. The drive back was wrapped in silence, but it was a silence full of meaning. Lena stared out the window at the blurred city lights, her hand still tingling from where Clara had held it. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had stepped into a truth she could never unlearn. When they reached her stop, Clara touched her arm gently. "Take care of yourself." Lena smiled faintly. "Only if you promise the same." Their eyes held, neither wanting to break the connection, until finally Lena stepped out. The night air was cool against her flushed skin. She watched the vintage car disappear into the distance, her body still humming with the memory of touch. Back in her room, she collapsed onto the bed fully dressed, too full of sensation to bother changing. She pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering the texture of Clara's kiss, the certainty in her embrace. Her heart raced, but it was no longer from fear. For the first time in her life, Lena felt she had touched something real, something more than desire. She had found an intimacy that was both tender and fierce, a mirror of who she wanted to become. Sleep took her slowly, carrying with it the image of Clara's eyes in the moonlight, filled not with sorrow but with promise. The morning after their night in the hangar, Lena awoke with a new weight inside her chest, though it was not heavy in the way of sorrow. It was more like the gravity of awareness, the realization that a threshold had been crossed and could never be reversed. The day stretched forward, ordinary in its appearances, yet every detail glowed with a strange intensity. The sun on the bricks outside her window seemed sharper, the voices in the street more distinct, her own breath fuller. She tried to sketch, but the pencil refused to obey. Every line she drew curved back toward Clara, toward the memory of lips pressed against hers, of hands that had guided without taking control. Lena pushed the papers aside and stared at the ceiling, her body restless. She had thought she might feel guilt or confusion, yet what rose inside her instead was clarity. In the days that followed, she noticed how her demeanor shifted. Friends remarked that she seemed distracted, and she laughed it off, unwilling to share what had happened. But late at night in her dorm, the truth pressed against her ribs like a secret waiting to burst free. Her roommate, Maya, was the first to sense more than a change in mood. One evening she returned unexpectedly and found Lena writing in her notebook, the page filled with half-formed poems about light, touch, and a woman's voice. Maya picked up one of the sheets before Lena could hide it. "This isn't about some guy," Maya said, narrowing her eyes. Lena froze. "No," she admitted finally. "It isn't." The silence that followed was thick. Maya's expression softened, but she shook her head. "You have to be careful. People talk. This school isn't as open as it pretends to be." Lena felt both gratitude and defiance. "I can't go back to hiding," she said quietly. Maya sighed, returned the paper, and left it at that. But her words lingered. Lena realized that stepping into her truth would not only transform her private life, it would ripple outward, demanding courage in every sphere. Clara, meanwhile, did not behave as though anything monumental had shifted. She still invited Lena to assist her on projects, still carried herself with her calm composure. Yet beneath that surface there was a subtle warmth that had not existed before. A glance held longer, a hand brushing against Lena's shoulder when unnecessary, a softness in her tone that suggested intimacy without naming it. One night after another long shoot, they sat in Clara's apartment surrounded by framed photographs stacked against the walls. The space smelled faintly of turpentine and old paper. Clara poured them tea instead of wine, and Lena sensed the intentional gentleness of the gesture. "I don't want to pretend nothing happened," Lena said suddenly. Clara looked at her, her eyes dark and steady. "Nor do I. But I also cannot promise what you may be hoping for." Lena's chest tightened. "Why not?" "Because my life has been a series of departures. People come and eventually they go. I don't want you to mistake discovery for permanence." Lena's throat ached, but she nodded. "Then let it be what it is. Just don't ask me to forget." Clara's expression softened. She reached across the table, took Lena's hand, and squeezed gently. "I would never ask that." Their connection grew in small, deliberate steps. They continued exploring the city together, capturing forgotten spaces before they disappeared. But for Lena, the focus shifted. The lens no longer pointed only outward. She began to turn it inward, to write about herself in ways she had never dared. She discovered that honesty carried its own beauty, that naming her truth gave her a strength she had not known she possessed. When whispers began circulating among her classmates' questions about why she spent so much time with an older woman, speculation about the nature of their relationship, Lena felt the sting, but also the liberation. She had nothing to deny, nothing to disguise. For once, she could answer in silence, her very presence a refusal to bend. One evening, she stood with Clara on a rooftop overlooking the river. The skyline glittered, 1,000 lights shimmering on the water. Lena leaned on the railing, the wind pushing strands of hair across her face. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Regret what?" Clara's voice was steady. "Loving women. Choosing this path." Clara was quiet for a long time. "I regret the years I spent pretending not to. I regret letting fear dictate who I could hold at night. But the love itself? Never. Even the pain was proof that I had lived honestly, if only for a while. The answer struck Lena deeply. She realized then that Clara had not simply been a guide into desire, but into authenticity itself. She had shown her what it meant to claim a life without apology. Weeks turned into months. Lena grew bolder. She began sharing her writing at open mic nights, pieces that hinted at her awakening without naming names. She met others who lived openly, women who offered friendship and solidarity. Each encounter expanded her world, yet Clara remained the axis around which her transformation revolved. They never labeled their bond. It was not romance in the conventional sense, nor mentorship alone. It was a convergence, a passage, a gift passed from one woman to another. Clara never promised forever, and Lena stopped asking. She understood now that what mattered was not duration but depth. One night, after a reading where Lena had nervously recited her own work, Clara walked her home. At the door, Clara paused, brushed her knuckles along Lena's cheek, and said, "You are not the girl I met in the rain anymore." Lena smiled, her eyes stinging. "Maybe not, but you're the reason I'm not." Clara kissed her forehead, then stepped back, her expression unreadable but tender. Remember, freedom isn't always easy, but it's worth everything. When Lena entered her room that night, she felt no fear of who she was. The words she had spoken aloud in front of strangers were still ringing in her ears. She understood that there would be challenges ahead, people who would judge, moments when loneliness would cut deep. But she also knew she would never again accept a life that was not her own. Months later, standing on a rooftop alone this time, Lena gazed at the city that had witnessed her transformation. The air smelled of summer rain, the streets shimmered below. She remembered the night Clara pulled over in that vintage car, how a simple offer of a ride had unraveled everything she thought she knew. Now she carried the strength of that encounter within her. Clara had given her more than affection. She had given her the courage to step into herself fully, without shame. Lena closed her eyes, let the wind press against her face, and whispered into the night, "I am free." For the first time, she believed it completely. Every story of love is also a story of discovery, and Lena's journey reminds us that sometimes the person we meet by chance becomes the mirror that shows us who we truly are. Through Clara, she found not only tenderness and desire, but the courage to claim her own voice, even when the world around her whispered doubts. Their connection was not about promises of forever, but about the transformation that comes when someone gives you permission to be honest with yourself. It takes strength to step into authenticity, to admit what your heart has always known, and to live it without apology. Lena learned that freedom is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. Clara's gift was not just affection, but a lesson that truth, however complicated, is always worth choosing. As you finish this story, perhaps you will think of the people who have shaped your path, those who offered you a glimpse of yourself you had never dared to see. And perhaps, like Lena, you will find the courage to embrace it fully. Thank you for watching. This is She and She, where every story is a step toward love without boundaries.